We at Naral Pro-Choice New York and the National Institute for Reproductive Health are truly unique. Unlike any other organization, we bring the perspective and experience of being both a hard-hitting political organization here in our home state and a national advocacy organization that partners with allies in cities and states all across the country. Our signature is our focus on a proactive agenda for and unapologetic approach to reproductive health rights and justice. That means we don't shy away from abortion or accept limits on young people's access.
I think it's very clear that women hold up half of the world. They certainly hold up more than half of New York State. We cannot separate women's reproductive health and their choices from the economy and their opportunities in the workplace. New York is ideally situated to pass the Women's Equality Act because New York is a progressive leader in the nation. New York was the birthplace of the women's rights movement, the labor movement, the civil rights movement, gay rights movement. New York has always been in the forefront.
There's a strong and growing movement of proactive pro-choice activity in communities across the country, even in quote-unquote red states. We are proud to have been a pioneer in what's becoming a growing movement from the ground up to advance a positive vision, concrete policies, and make real change all across the country. The National Institute for Reproductive Health and Naral Pro-Choice New York are playing a role in lifting up those efforts to turn the tide. Our work in 4 states helps paint that picture of where and how we do that work. Here in New York, we are engaged in a bold campaign to pass the Women's Equality Act that promotes access to abortion and places those decisions in the context of women's lives and what women need to be fully equal.
Naral is fearless. They are bold. They are progressive. They are smart advocates for women because they understand that if women don't control their bodies, they cannot control their present or their future.
In Pennsylvania, we're proud to work with a coalition that's working to pass a proactive agenda, inspired and informed in part by the Women's Equality Act campaign we're doing here in New York.
Pennsylvania has long had a history of opposition to a woman's right to choose. The New York Women's Equality Act has informed our strategy in Pennsylvania very strongly. So the experience in New York has really helped us in Pennsylvania avoid some of the pitfalls that we may have experienced had we not had the model through the National Institute for Reproductive Health. It's invested in helping other organizations in other states to improve the conditions of women's lives. And I think that gives New York Naral a very unique place.
In Tennessee, we invested over several years to help a broad coalition to improve reproductive health outcomes and move the needle on reproductive rights in that state. Sister Reach has also engaged a younger generation of activists to work around reproductive justice.
I think it's really important for youth to be involved in changing policy around comp sex ed because it directly affects their lives. It affects their lives not only currently, but it affects the trajectory of their lives. We did 3 focus groups through our Urban Initiative grant. That was with teens from marginalized communities, that was with parents from marginalized communities, and that was also with teachers who taught in those communities. The role that young people will play in the long run in Tennessee is hopefully that they will become youth advocates that turn into adult advocates. That these fundamental things that they're learning at young ages will be something that they will be able to continue and they become the policy makers of tomorrow. Having youth engaged means that we keep our pulse on what's happening in time. The National Institute's commitment to reproductive justice is honest. It feels like they get it, that they understand that, you know, they're putting their money where their mouth is.
In Texas, we worked with partners for several years and helped lay the groundwork of the activism that overtook the Texas State House in 2013. We continue to work with those allies, including Whole Women's Health, an incredible independent abortion provider, to keep the momentum alive in a state so rich with possibility.
The way I would describe the last year in Texas is a lot happened and a lot of things were exciting. There was a lot of awakening of a lot of people who don't normally participate in the political process. It was also the worst year on record for women's rights and women's health care in Texas. With NIRH's support, we were able to have enough money to design the t-shirts. We decided to have a flash mob and we did the launching of the repeal of the Sano bill. We also got some technical support from NIRH, especially related to the flash mob piece. And this really allowed us to take action simply, locally, and quickly. How can we make participation simple and accessible for people, and how can we get our message out that we're not going to stand for these kind of laws anymore, and do it in a way that doesn't apologize for abortion care and for women who seek abortion. Conversations about abortion have to happen, and with NIRH's support, we're going to be able to have that more nuanced conversation about abortion.
These are just a few of the examples of how Naral Pro-Choice New York and the National Institute for Reproductive Health are building relationships with elected leaders, advocates, and activists all across the country to create real, meaningful, lasting change from the bottom up.